So let me hand you over now to our Executive Director, Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp. Before Prof. Maria joined the library, in March 2018, she was the Vice Dean at the Faculty of Humanities. So let me hand you over and introduce you to Prof. Maria.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We've got a wonderful panel of people that are going to be giving short presentations, unpacking the OJS platform, but also talking about open access publishing in South Africa from the perspective of different disciplines. But before I hand over to my panel, we are very thrilled to have our DVC Research and Internationalization, Prof. Sarab Sinha, joining us today. And because I know that there are many pressures on his time, I'm going to hand over to him to kick us off and just give us a little bit of context about OJS and open access publishing in the South African context. So, Prof. Sinha, over to you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Maria, and thanks to the colleagues who have really helped us get to this space in terms of the Open Journal system subscription for the university. And I'm also grateful for the panelists who will be, sharing their own experiences. I want to say that the Open Journal component has initiated for us as a university perhaps a number of years ago, and it has partly come about as a number of our publications are behind, when our publications occur, our researchers make a submission of those publications to the institutional repository, and as per different copyright provisions that we have with publishers, we try to make available this research for the public at large. In effect, we enable for open access for these publications, this set of publications. This has been important for us as we are a publicly funded organization, and industry and people outside are always looking for, how they can collaborate with us and how can they benefit from the research that emanates from an institution. And so the institutional repository had been an important milestone for us, and it has also helped us in terms of developing our academic citation impact. But of course, it also leads to other things which enables for the socioeconomic impact that the area of publications brings for the institution. I think it was about 2 years ago that the Editors Forum, which is a composition of editors at the institution, and these are editors who either through their position at the university or through their position in their own respective professional society, they are also managing they're managing journals. But managing journals is no easy process. It is establishing platforms which benefit the community of academics, and often for the editors there is not always sufficient recognition, and we do as an institution find our best way to make this, to recognize the editors. I myself am involved very deeply with two journals. One is over 100 years, and so there is a tremendous amount of momentum and movement that happens around a journal, and the task of the editors-in-chief, who are often volunteers, is quite cumbersome, and it also has to be managed in a way that there is an audit trail that can be established in the unlikely event where there becomes a process challenge, or if we have to make editorial submissions to the Department of Higher Education and Training. That is the entity that looks at and recognizes research output subsidy in South Africa. I recognize that some of our audience is not from South Africa today. So that's where it started. And so we said, what are those common things that editors do, and what tool can we bring together that can enable them to manage the coordination with the different specialist editors? And it is in that spirit that we brought this platform. and my appreciation to the team from the Library and Information Center of the University of Johannesburg who took on this project and have provided leadership for this. Now, while we are having this question as a university, the Academy of Science in South Africa, as well as the universities of South Africa, they have also been grappling with this at a national level, as the aspect that we deal as an institution is only a representation of what other institutions also need and share. So that's one component which relates primarily to our aspiration today with the open journal system. Then there is a second set of conversations that's ongoing in terms of, I did talk about the institutional repository that makes available publicly funded research back to the public where it is possible in terms of copyright. But where it is not possible, how do we leverage, with the different publishers, international and national, that we can have, a more, financially viable system for article processing charges as one component, to have a national license that enables for article processing charges. And second to that is that, how do we use the power of institutions together for leveraging pricing, but also to leverage our intellectual identity as South Africa through an open access platform. And so that is essentially what is ongoing at a national level for University South Africa. And the view is that we will approach the publications and publishing houses together as a sector, so that we can share the best practices bottom up, institution-wise, but also top from an international perspective, so that we can leverage those best practices in the interest of the institution. So I'm going to pause here and hand back over to Maria Otterenicke, so that we can initiate this important conversation with those who are close to OJS. And I will also say that I'm personally a user of this system for journals that I'm directly involved with, at least one journal that I'm directly involved with. Thank you, Maria, and I'm handing over back to you to progress this discussion.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. I'm just quickly going to mention the three speakers that will be speaking. The first one is Roza Carvalho. She works in external communication at Africa Journals Online and handles all new applications to join the journal platform. She started working at AJOL in 2015, and most recently she was part of a team of assessors that worked on the flagship Journal Publishing Practices and Standards project. Africa Journals Online is one of the world's largest online collections of African published peer-reviewed scholarly journals. And so Roza has a lot of experience working on the OJS platform, and she is going to give us a little bit more detail about how OJS works. After Roza has spoken, we're going to move on to Prof. Nicolette Houreld, and she is currently an associate and deputy chairholder for the SARChI Center on Laser Applications in Health in the Laser Research Center, which is part of the Faculty of Health Sciences. Her research interests lie in the area of photobiomodulation and diabetic wound healing, where she investigates the molecular and cellular effects of photobiomodulation and laser tissue interaction. She is currently a C1-NRF rated scientist and has a Scopus H index of 21. And then we're going to move on to Professor Clinton Aigbavboa, who is currently the Director of Construction, Industry Development, Board Center of Excellence and Sustainable Human Development and Construction in the Department of Construction Management and Quality Surveying at the School of Civil Engineering and the Built Environment at UJ. Previously, he served as the Vice Dean for Postgraduate Studies, Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment from 2017 to 2019. He has published more than 400 peer-reviewed journals, book proceedings, conference proceedings, and book chapters. And he is also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Construction, Project Management and Innovation, which is a DHEAD accredited journal. He is also an NRF-rated researcher and has received national and international recognition in his field of research. But before I hand over to my different panelists, I just want to give a little bit of background to how we got to OJS and what the library has to offer. So as Prof. Sinha was saying, an OJS platform is part of the bigger national conversation around open access scholarship, which is then also part of a much bigger international conversation. So as you well know, countries like Germany have left Elsevier altogether, and the California University Group has also left Elsevier, saying that they don't need to be part of these big publishing conglomerates that require so much money from us as universities, and particularly libraries, in order to access their research. In Germany and in Europe, Plan S is the sort of latest development in open access. And behind the argument is the idea that much of research that is published has already been funded by government entities, and why should people then have to pay to access information that the government has already paid to have done? And so in countries like Germany, the open access conversation is much further along, largely because their governments are keen to fund the open access project. In a very different context, Latin America also has a very vibrant open access scene. In South Africa, we've been a bit slower to get on board with open access, and one of the reasons has been, how do we fund this? So when I joined the library, I started looking around at different models, because I think that open access is the way to go, but publishing and information is never free. So either you have a government that's paying for it in the back end, as you do in Germany, or some other way has to be found. In UJ, we have the particular setup where scholars are given a percentage of money into their research account. And it would be very difficult to ask scholars to use that money to pay for article processing fees, because most of us use that money to travel, to do small research projects. And if we now have to spend all that money on article processing fees, it would really hold us back. So one of the things that I looked into in the library was, is there another way? Is there another international model that we could look at? And the University of Pittsburgh, together with many other American universities, work on the model where libraries fund at least a portion of article processing costs. And so what we agreed as UJ in Senate was that every faculty can take a portion of what we call in the library the book budget. This is not a budget dedicated only to your books. It is basically the budget that isn't pre-allocated. In other words, when we sign up to various different databases, we have 3 or 5 year contracts, and so that money is pre-allocated. But then we have a portion of money that isn't pre-allocated. And I'm suggesting that from this money, different faculties choose how much of that money they want to use for article processing fees. As Prof. Sinha mentioned, there is a much bigger South African conversation going on through an organization called SANLEC to form a consortium that lobbies for the lowest possible article processing fees. But as I explored this environment more and more, and am myself an editor of a journal, I realized that there were a couple of things at play. First, we all know that the editorial work is done for free by us, the academics. We also are the ones that do all the peer review work. So what then are the publishers offering us? Well, they offer us prestige, reputation. They offer us layout, very often editing, but not always. And then, of course, advertising and helping to get your citations up. So what would an open journal system offer us? Well, firstly, when I looked into it, it is quite feasible for UJ Library to bear the cost of the OJS, Open Journal System platform, for at least 100 journals. We don't have 100 journals at UJ or affiliated to UJ. So unlike Sabinet or Oasis, who also work on the same platform but charge you to host their journal, we in the library are saying you can host your journal on this system for free. Because if we as one entity buy enough licenses, the cost is so minimal that we can carry the cost as the library. We can't offer you editorial support and we can't offer you layout support. But what we do offer you is lots of support in the process of setting up your journal on the OJS platform and then administrative help with your platform. Rosa is going to talk much more about what OJS can do for you. But the thing that I want to flag up at the end of my little presentation is the question of advertising and citations. And I think one of the things we have to do when we move into the open access world is to recognize that the way our work is advertised also needs to change. So as soon as you publish something as an open access article, you can put it up for free on on academia.edu or ResearchGate. And those of you who already use these sites will know that your work gets downloaded so quickly and it really pushes up your citation rates. So the whole open access conversation around citations, visibility, marketing are very important, but I think need to be seen in a different light to the way that we have looked at traditional publishing. Okay, with that little introduction, I'm going to hand over to Rosa. And Rosa, to get us started, can I ask, why do you think that OJS is a platform that works well for open access publishing?
Well, firstly, it is an open source platform that has had a lot of community input into it, so it's constantly being changed and improved. And that means that it's had a lot of input from users and been brought to the point where its functionality really is helpful for editors, and it has a lot of tools available for editors to take away some of that administrative burden that Prof. Sinha was talking about. So I think I'd just like to start my presentation by just saying thank you to the UJ Library team for the invite to participate in this panel, and begin with a brief introduction about African Journals Online and how we use and go into how we use OJS. So African Journals Online is a small non-profit organization. We're based in Makanda, Grahamstown. I've been working for Aigjavboa for just over 5 years. And as mentioned before, I work in external comms and I handle applications to join the website. So we are basically an online host and journal aggregator. So many people get us confused with a journal publisher, which is not what we do. What we do is we give journals the tools to host their platform, their journals for free. So we don't offer publishing services per se, but rather an online platform for journals. So currently we have over 500 peer-reviewed African journals on our website from 32 African countries. So of those 526 journals, 264 of them are open access. And we currently have just over 114,000 full-text open access articles available for download. And Aigjavboa is a large support and vocal proponent of open access in Africa, with our mission to be to increase the availability and access to African published research. So the services that we provide to African published journals they're all free services. So it includes a journal homepage, metadata and full text hosting, and DOI facilitation through Crossref. And we also expose our journals to millions of users a month. So we provide all of these services using Open Journal Systems, OJS. So now that you have a bit of a background on my organization, I'll just cover what OJS is. This is a very macro view and speaking from our practical experience using OJS over the years. And I'll talk about what tools it makes available. So OJS was first released by the Public Knowledge Project, PKP, in 2001. So PKP is a multi-university international consortium that's dedicated to developing free open source software and improving the quality and reach of research and publication. So OJS is an all-inclusive free tool for managing and publishing scholarly journals, and currently over 10,000 journals use it worldwide. So its features include various front-end themes and designs, as well as back-end editorial workflow management, author submission tools, and integration with publishing services like ORCID and Crossref. It's also available in over 30 languages, and the PKP website offers extensive user support and online video training. So as an organization, Angel first started using OJS in 2005. Those were the earlier versions of OJS that we used, and we've been using it then for over 15 years. So because it's open source software, we've been able to customize it specifically for our needs. Those being to host a large suite of journals, which is not necessarily its original intended use, but because it's open source, we've been able to do that. However, we still use it in a way that many individual journals and editors would use it. So the latest version of OJS that's available is OJS 3. Angel had been using OJS 2 for the duration of my time here, and we've only recently upgraded to OJS 3, which was a huge technical and logistical undertaking because we had to migrate all of our 500 journal content information to the new system. But we've done that, and I've now been using OJS 3 for the last 3 months, and I found it to be an overwhelmingly positive experience. So we administer some of the metadata input and uploading of content online for journals, but a lot of our journals receive training from us in how to use OJS. That can be in-person training, which we do at workshops. Our last workshop was in Ethiopia, or it can also be online training. So, and then aside from that, some of our journals also use what we call the full workflow. So this starts from author submission through to peer review and then to publishing the actual issue online. So to go into a few more of those features in detail, on the user front end of OJS, you can create a journal landing page, which will include a contact page, an editorial team page, an information for authors page. Here you can include various policies like your copyright policy, your open access policy, publication ethics, those kind of things. You can also, on your front end, have an author submission page where authors will be able to directly upload their article for consideration, including their name and various details. The article then gets directly inputted into the administrative back end. The front end also will display your current issues, archival issues, and DI links. So the back end of OJS is basically an automated version of the normal processes that happen in an editorial office. And as Prof. Sinha said, there's a large administrative burden on journals to go through these publishing processes, and OJS takes a lot of that administrative burden away. So it can improve overall the efficiency of the publishing process and has the potential to cut down the time from author submission to acceptance and then to final publication. So the back-end workflow will begin with an author submission, and then users who've been given editorial or managerial roles within the journal are able to review the submission and then decide if it's suitable. Accepted submissions can then go into peer review, where a managing editor is able to decide the type of peer review that they want the article to go through and then assign reviewers. Once an article goes through multiple rounds of review, and the editors and reviewers are all able to communicate and send reminders to each other through the system internally. Articles also can go through proofing stages on the system, and then from there, articles can go to production and can be assigned to a future issue. So author metadata like emails, correspondence, author IDs, affiliations can also all be added for reader information. Also, there are various plugins compatible with organizations like Crossref, PubMed, DataCite, and the DOAJ. So we mostly use the Crossref export tool and the quick submission tool here at Agile. So just to wrap up, some of the top line advantages of Ojs, firstly, is that it's open source and that it's free. That also means it's constantly, as I said at the beginning, being revised and improved by an online community. Its user front end is modern and user friendly, and the back end is a fully inclusive online editorial manager for journals. It's definitely not a perfect system, and some of it does take some getting used to, which is why that online training is important. And some aspects aren't as intuitive as you might like them to be. However, while there's room for that improvement, on its merits, I do think that it's a wonderful publishing tool for journals.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Right, so our next speaker is Nicolette. And Nicolette, you are an advocate of open access publishing. And I wonder if you could share some of your experiences with us and how you think open access publishing has helped you in your career.
Thank you, Prof. Maria. Yes, first of all, just thanks to you and to the library for inviting me to take part in today's discussion. So, yeah, I'm just going to talk just about a little bit on open access publishing, sort of in general and my experiences. So, yeah, well, with open access, there's obviously an instant global reach. And you have immediate access to high academic content and high visibility of researchers' work. So there's no longer these barriers to access academic content. You know, I remember doing my doctorate and you were trying to get hold of journals and you were trying to get papers through the library, and it was just a little bit cumbersome at times. Whereas now, if you publish in open access, you don't have those barriers, those problems. You know, you've got the journal or the full article at your fingertips immediately. So it really makes things very easy for people to see your work and to cite your work and use your work. There's this benefit to the academic institutions, whether it be the institution itself, the faculty, the department, the funders, and society as a whole, because we can achieve our mission to develop and disseminate knowledge. There's always this discussion about disseminating the knowledge. Well, on open access, it's immediately there, it's immediately available. Everybody gets to see it. Yeah, so the content is obviously then delivered at no cost to the reader. So you're expanding your access to literally anyone that has internet connection and anyone who has an interest in that particular topic. So there's a lot greater coverage of the research if you publish in open access. If we talk about the impact of open access on rankings, well, because there's this broader distribution and more research have access to your work, you have this increased visibility and increased exposure for the authors. And in doing so, there's obviously an elevation of one's profile and of your rankings. And there's also an enhancement of the reputation of the publications and the institutions and the funding institutions with which your papers are associated with. Authors can use the content itself as a platform to raise your own profile, as well as to establish direct relationships with the users. So, as was mentioned earlier on, that you could publish your open access article on ResearchGate, and then your articles would get downloaded from that platform, and you would interact directly with your readers. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely an improvement on rankings there. With regards to sort of open access in my own research, well, basically we going more towards open access publishing because of the benefits that it has, but also because a lot of the funding organizations they are actually encouraging and they want you to do open access publishing. And it's some of the conditions of some of the grants of some of the funders. So if we look at the NRF, for example, that funds a lot of research in South Africa, one of their strategic objectives is actually scientific, literate, and engaged society. So as part of your grant applications, you actually have to say, how are you going to get that information out into the public domain? And obviously one of the easiest ways to do that is to publish open access. So as Prof. Sina spoke about earlier on, he spoke about the institution repository. So publishing or posting your articles into the institution repository is one such way that you can make your articles openly accessible to everyone. And publishing open access has two ways. You can either publish your article before it has been, or your accepted article before it's been accepted by the journal. Some journals allow you to publish or to post that version of the article into the institution repository. Some of them allow you on your personal platforms. And then obviously you get the purely open access journal where the authors have paid for the whole publication process, and then the article is free to the end users. So yeah, as I mentioned, so the NRF, they actually want us to start doing that. And so it's changing the way a lot of researchers are working and looking at the way of publishing and putting their work out there.
Nicolette, thank you so much for that background. That's been very helpful, and I'm sure it's going to lead to quite a few questions. Please remember, if you've got questions for any of the speakers, do put your questions in the Zoom group chat, and we'll come to them at the end of the presentation. I'm now going to hand over to Prof. Clinton to share some of his experiences using the OJS platform and open access in the engineering and built environment.
Thanks very much for the invite and for the library team. I think on my side, looking at the impact of open access in the Faculty of Engineering, just to add to what the other colleagues have said, with open access, you realize that we're actually able to return scholarly publishing to its original purpose. And this purpose basically to spread knowledge and also to allow that particular knowledge that is being spread to be built upon. Because if knowledge is not spread in the right manner that people will actually gain quick access to it, we will not be able to actually build upon it. Because we know that postgraduate studies actually most of the time and we always have a theoretical background, from there to a conceptual understanding. Knowledge needs to be built upon, and with open access, we're actually able to return to that particular original purpose of a scholarly publishing. Whereas with the closed-ended system, you realize that it becomes so difficult. And one of the things with open access, generally, looking at it from the engineering perspective, is that it actually gives that ideal of free and accessible human knowledge. Because as engineers, we want to advance innovation, we want to advance society, but at the same time, it doesn't make any sense for us to be charging so much exorbitant price for people to actually, or for scholars to get access to these particular publications. So open access is free in the sense of the free licenses, free in the sense of no technical barriers, and barriers here we're looking at the price barriers, which should not prevent students from getting access to research that they need. And open access, just to add to what Nicolette was saying also, actually have a significant positive impact on everything from education and to the practice of engineering and its innovation. And on our side, what open access has actually done for us is that it actually makes our research to be readily available to the practitioners for them to actually apply our findings. Because if our research is locked up in media that they cannot access to read, you realize that the discoveries in the engineering field cannot really benefit the practitioners. And also, from my own experience, and looking at it generally to add to what Prof. Sina was saying in terms of the broader South Africa context, that with open access, we're actually able to get value for taxpayers' money that is used to fund research projects. Because if you look at the current model where like the SCVR model and all that, where we have to pay so much. Most of this research, and they're basically funded by taxpayer money. They need to get back to society so that we can actually build upon it. And also, in the Faculty of Engineering, looking at what we do closely with the industry, it also enables our findings to get access to the public. So the public knows what is, and their colleagues in the Faculty of Engineering doing research on innovations in terms of how to actually ensure that we have sensors in bridges to give real-time monitoring of how these particular bridges are aging. If you look at the experience that we had in Johannesburg, sometimes last year, where the M2 had to be closed for some time, and there are research that has been done, that we conducted in that field, that can actually be available to the public, and it will help the municipalities and all that to actually be able to use them to improve those particular infrastructure we have. But overall, and looking at engineering from the African perspective, looking at 54 African countries, and the countries have been able to move to the open access system, you realize that our research is also is now available to researchers in developing countries, because most of the developing countries, some countries don't have database at all. Most universities don't have access to it. But with the open access platform, they're actually able to access publications from the engineering field. Your work become exposed, and at the same time, you realize that our research is able to influence policy, which is what we want. And as engineers, as academians, we want our research to influence policy, so that what is being done in society, there is that particular industry collaboration with academia, not just the usual advice, but from the research that is being done. So I wanted to add this basically to say, in engineering, this is what we see the potentials, and open access really comes in to actually assist in this particular aspect. I don't want to speak to the citation aspect, which has been mentioned, but for us as engineers, you realize that most of the engineering domains, let's say like quantities of the built environment, they are actually kind of really new, and with open access, we're actually able to collaborate with colleagues from other disciplines that see our work online, and they realize that we can actually be able to carry out multidisciplinary research. Open access have actually helped me, in particular, working in the engineering field, to actually have lots of collaborators that actually stumbled on your work online, and they are interested in that particular field that you're working on. So these are some of the things that open access is actually doing in the field of engineering. However, we need to really get to understand that with open access doesn't mean that the quality is basically not there, because the quality of the publication actually is handled, like what Nicolette and Roza have said, from the back end, because there are editors, there are various rules that are basically being used in actually determining the quality of the journals. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Prof. Clinton. So this is what our OJS website at UJ looks like. So for those of you who have a journal and would like to host it on the site, this is the back end that you would see. It's not the front end that people coming onto your journal would see. So Renika, if you could just click on one of the journals so that we get a sense of what it looks like when you land on a page. Land on a site of a journal. Okay, so this is Prof. Clinton's journal, and you can see it's got a very different look and feel, and you designed your own look and feel. Now, one of the great advantages of the OJS platform is if Renika could click onto submissions. Basically, what the system does is it automates the whole submissions process. So somebody will submit an article, and you, the editorial team, will have decided where does an article go. So perhaps you have subdivisions within your journal. For example, one of the journals I work on, Pentecostalism, is one of the subfields. And so anything to do with Pentecostalism automatically comes to me. And then you automate the whole process of inviting reviewers. The system automatically reminds reviewers when the review is due, and also helps to keep the person who has submitted something up to date. So this is just one of the back-end administrative advantages of the system. And it really takes away a lot of that very hands-on, labor-intensive work that most journal editors land up having to do. Obviously, there is lots of advertising that you can do on your site. You can have your Twitter feeds, you can link to other journals, you can have all sorts of different ways in which you alert people to new articles that have been published. And of course, you can keep all the back all the back articles from previous publications on your site. Okay, I want to get to some of the questions that people have been asking. And the first one is around the compromise of quality. And I think this is a really big conversation for open access. So do open access journals just take your money in order to get the articles out? Nicolette, would you like to give this one a stab?
Yeah, I think there's always this sort of misconception and maybe this worry that any journal or any article or anything like that that's open access is, predatory in one of these predatory journals. So, and of course that's not true. So yes, there is predatory journals out there. Yes, we need to be aware of these. We need to be careful what journals we publish in. But just because you are sort of paying for your article to be published doesn't mean that you're compromising on the quality or the integrity of the work. A lot of the open access journals, they are subject to the same rigorous peer review process, editorial scrutiny. So I don't think there's any question about quality and reliability of the research in these reputable journals. And I think it's got more advantages than it does disadvantages, but just as long as you're aware of which is the predatory journals that are maybe taking money just to publish, that don't go through these rigorous sort of processes. So you really need to do your homework as someone that's going to publish and what journal you're going to decide to publish in. But definitely I don't think just because it's open access, there's this, it's of a lesser quality or anything like that. Many journals have very high impact factors and they are open access.
Then we have a question around plagiarism and Turnitin. And one of the people that is with us today is a lady called Bilkish Samad, and she has been very helpful to us at UJ in setting up our Ojs system and teaching us how to use it. And Billy, I wonder if you could answer this question. How does one deal with plagiarism? Is there a Turnitin function or something similar?
Sure, Maria, thank you. So I'm the developer that works on the system. OJS is built using the PHP programming language, and I specialize in that as a developer, and I've been in the industry for about 16 years, so I've worked with many systems. In terms of plagiarism, I'm not sure if you mean exactly with articles, because not in that regard, but I can speak with regards to the security of the system in terms of OJS itself. So PKP is a securely deployed software, and they have a process that is followed that deals with security issues. And the UJ system has been set up by PKP themselves, so we can rest assured that all is secure in that regard. Also, editors and users access the journal via an authentication process where they need to securely log into the system, and each user can be given restricted access where the journal manager still controls who can see which sections of the journal. So that's restricted. In terms of security of the site, we make sure that there's always a secure certificate that's available, and we deal with the backend issues, but in terms of the deployment process, that has been done securely.
What we are wanting to encourage people to do who use the OJS system at the library is that you can quite easily put in a plugin to Turnitin, so that as an editor, as soon as you get a journal, it actually just, with the click of a button, goes through the Turnitin software, and then before you send it out to reviewers, you can be sure that this isn't a plagiarized article. The next question that I have is possibly to you, Rosa. Could you give us a little bit more detail about some of the administrative tools that OJS has, and does OJS help one to manage the finances? So if you're an open access journal and, okay, you don't have to pay for the OJS system, but you're still paying someone to do editing, so you're still charging some kind of article processing cost. Does OJS help with that?
I just want to just clarify the issue with the plagiarism detector. As far as I know, with OJS, you can include a plagiarism checker plugin specifically.
Yeah.
So you'd have to download it, I think, like you mentioned. Yes. So with the admin tools, I think you briefly touched on them, as well as the automated submission process is one of the main and the biggest advantage with the admin tools. The peer review process, the automated reminders, emails. Once you input a reviewer's details, you'll have their email addresses, and they'll have a profile on the system. And once an article comes in, it will automatically be sent to that reviewer, like you said, in the subject area. As for the managing of the finances, so that's not something that we specifically use OJS for, so I can't really speak to that in any detail. However, it does allow for different publishing models. So you can have an open access journal or a subscription journal, or even a journal with an embargo period. So we have those different models on our platform, and we are able to accept payments for article downloads through PayPal and to checkout on African Journals Online. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I think in more detail, well, at least than I was expecting, so thank you. Right, the next question is, I think to you, Prof. Clinton. When people use when people host a journal on the OJS system, would it mean that people can still find your articles on Google Scholar?
When your journal is hosted on the OJS platform like our journal, there is the Google Scholar plugin that you need to activate. And as soon as your journals are published, they will basically be synchronized through the Google plugin system, and everything is available via the Google platform. And most of the colleagues that have published with us, their journals automatically get registered with the Google Scholar for those who already have a profile. So I think with the OJS generally, what it has done for our journal, it has given us very good visibility, because one of the things that we struggled with prior to actually moving our journal to the OJS platform, initially we're being hosted through Sabinet. We really struggled with the management of the entire process, and the credibility of the journal is actually doubted when the editors are still receiving emails of articles and all that. So it means there is no control. You actually a whole lot of articles are lost in transit. You end up having to do a lot of emails. But with the OJS system for our journal, we realize that we're actually able to manage our journals very well. We are able to actually allocate reviewers. We don't just do it randomly. We look at those who are available for us, and at the same time, it's available on Google. And also just to speak to the plagiarism checker, OJS actually subscribes to the Authenticate, not Turnitin. So that you have to pay for separately. It's not one of the free services. Yeah, so it's available on Google also. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, what I meant with Authenticate or Turnitin is that we can set up that plugin for you when you set up a journal with us in the library. But yeah, there is a bit of an extra cost. Thank you so much, Clinton. Now we have a question that's come through around Doughhead Publishing, and I'm going to take the question, although it's not directly related to OJS. The question is, does a journal need to declare the number of issues or volumes to get accredited with Doughhead? Or is publishing a sufficient number of articles for example, 20 articles a year acceptable for accreditation. Now, the accreditation process is a little bit more complicated than this, but I see that Prof. Sinner is still with us. And I wonder, Prof. Sinner, if you would like to take a stab at this question.
For articles that are, let's say you have a journal which is hosted by OJS. The university or the journal has to provide evidence that it is not one institution that dominates that journal. They look at the total number of publications published in that journal over a year, and the journal or the institution making the submission go ahead has to provide evidence that it is not more than 25% that is from one institution. It can sometimes be challenging because you may find that you have an author which has multiple affiliations because this may be a visiting academic. And so it is not impossible to very quickly to breach that rule, but that's a compliance aspect. Secondary to that is the aspect that the peer review process must be truly independent. It must involve scholars. And for instance, in the journal that I'm involved in, I try to diversify and have an internationally composed editorial board, and we do the same for the reviewers. So it brings about quite a diversity in terms of the panel. Thirdly is the evidence of peer review, and that must be kept. And that evidence is not solicited by the DHET for journal articles and for journals that are already accredited, but it helps where you have audit processes or where the scholarly review takes place through the Academy of Science. So the good thing about OJS is that audit trail can also be kept. So I think it's that combination that is looked at, those three things that are important for a go-ahead process in the short term, but also in the long term for the journal. Maria, I hope I answered the question.
Very well, thank you. Prof. Clinton, you've gone through something of this quite recently. Is there something you would like to add to this question?
Just to add to what Prof. Sinner has said, the journal also needs to have been in existence for a period of 2 years minimum. And after you have been in existence of 2 years minimum with the audit trail in terms of the peer review process, as he has mentioned, then you can apply for a DHET accreditation through the University Research Office. Then I think the other thing that is also very important is the aspect that your journal needs to have a dedicated period when, in terms of the numbers of issue that is being published, and with the numbers of issue that is being published per annum, they also need to look at the frequency in terms of the delays, or if there is that aspect of consistency. I want to just add that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Billy, I'm going to ask you to answer the last question that we're going to have time for, and that is, open systems are always fragile and can be susceptible to viruses and hackers. What sort of cybersecurity is there on the OJS platform?
Okay, with regards to security, the OJS is deployed securely and has been deployed by PKP themselves. So we follow the industry standard processes of managing the site securely. We enable the SSL certificate to make sure that every user entering the site is seeing a secure page. We set up the system file, the file system is set up in a way that is not easily accessible to hackers, so that there is, the file system is set up in a way that the folders aren't available, the folders that need to be updated via the system isn't publicly accessible. So in that sense, and then in terms of security, there is a list of security measures that PKP themselves take to ensure that the site is always secure, and it sits on their server. So we ensure that all of that is being maintained and that backups, etc., is being done.
We've come to the end of our time, so I would very much like to thank Billy and Rosa and Nicolette and Sarab and Clinton for their participation and for helping us to understand how the system works. I'd also really like to thank my team at the library, Renika, Alrina, Palesa and Theo, who have at the back end made sure that everything has worked so smoothly. We really appreciate your help. Today was the launch of our OJS system. As you saw very briefly, we already have 4 journals that are up on the system, and we invite you to send us questions, to ask us to show you a bit more. We are going to be doing a series of trainings and demonstrations on how the system works, but we're also very happy to meet with people individually to have a conversation with you and see if this would be a platform that would work for your journal. Now that we know more about the OJS system and we have wonderful people like Billy helping us, we are able to help you migrate from another platform onto the OJS platform. It does take a little bit of time, but we have now worked out how to do this. This was a question asked of us last year when we were not quite so sure, but we have since learned a lot more about the system and are feeling a lot more confident. So my invitation is to contact myself or Renika if you have any questions around OJS. For those of you who know Ivy, our faculty librarian for postgraduate studies, she's also deeply involved in this process, so you can contact her as well. And then, as I say, you can speak to us individually, talk to us, and we can hear what your issues are and how we can help you. And then watch out in our social media for further trainings and demonstrations that we'll be giving. Thank you all so much for today, and I hope to be speaking to many of you in the upcoming weeks. Have a very good afternoon.